Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
How are you, sir? You feeling better?
Not really, ma'am.
Your medicines aren't working?
It's too early. It's just been a day and a half. So it'll take time. 10 days, he said.
Right.
Yeah. And he said even 10 days, uh, there is no guarantee that these will bring about the thing that I've been told very clearly is that there is no cure for the condition, and that I have to basically undergo this pain. The only thing that they can do is keep the pain in manageable limits. That is the thing, that is what has been told to me. And such surgery is not really an option, because of my being overweight, and I could kick the bucket while they are performing surgery. So that is more or less ruled out. So let's put up with the pain, put up with it.
Yes, sir.
Why complain? Complaining doesn't make anything easy, doesn't make it better. That's what I keep telling my wife when she has complaints about several things. I tell her, these are not in our hands. You should stop complaining and accept things as they are.
Yes, sir.
So I think we should get. No, they can be here. It's okay. Maya, they can. Um, okay, so let's get going. Yesterday, I was talking to you about a number of things which Hegel was addressing himself to, and I had told you that Hegel is finding answers to certain questions and propositions that had been raised by other philosophers. Logically, the first of all these should be Cartesian dualism or duality. I personally don't think dualism is a very correct form, but more and more scholars are using Cartesian dualism rather than duality. Then the second thing that we see Hegel addressing himself to is alienation in a bourgeois society. That this comes from Rousseau. Then the third thing that he's addressing himself to is the antinomies that Kant found in his philosophy. Antinomies are technically those contradictions that do not or cannot have solutions. One very stupid but effective example of an antinomy is parallel lines. Parallel lines, by definition, will never meet, right? So anything which is like parallel lines defies the solution of meeting somewhere. That is an antinomy. So Kant talks about various antinomies. I'm not going to go through all of them. For one, Immanuel Kant is a pretty complex philosopher in his own right. And Hegel is even more complicated. So it doesn't really serve any purpose to go on deeply into Kant, because the deeper we go into Kant, the deeper we have to go into Hegel, and that basically means that we would be uh, spending a lot of time. We would be spending a lot of time with Hegel himself. Even during my student days, there used to be a joke. People used to call me Hegel. And the reason why they would do that is because I would have these long discussions in class which were boring to other people. I'd have these long discussions with my teacher, Professor Sudipto Kaviraj, and people would say that once I get going, then there's no stopping. So they didn't call me Hegel out of respect. They called me Hegel more out of, what should I say, to make fun of me. It was friendly banter, it wasn't unfriendly. So it's okay. But I have this deep-rooted fascination for Hegel. And while I was in Nizam College, students from the philosophy department used to come and attend my classes on German philosophers. There we had, what should I say? We had a Kant also in our syllabus. So a lot of those students used to come and attend my classes because, as one fellow said, you teach these as if these are all your ideas. I said, I'm extremely sorry if I'm giving you that particular idea. These are not my ideas. I barely understand them. Anyway, so no point in going deep into Kant, because going deep into Kant would mean going deeper into Hegel. Going deeper into Hegel would mean less time or no time for other philosophers. So keeping that in view, um, keeping that in view, we will have to only skim the surface of Kantian antinomies. But that's still in the distance for now. Let us Let's start with Rene Descartes and his mind-body dualism. Let me call it what most people are calling it. So, Rene Descartes, um, a French thinker, basically believed in a mind-body dualism, and what you see in Rene Descartes is this idea that mind and body can exist independently of each other. Yeah, so they can exist independently of each other. You must understand that Descartes was writing in the times following the Renaissance. The original Renaissance, and was trying to bring about a unity between the sacerdotium and the imperium. This is what he was trying to do. He wanted to have something like a state, but he also wanted the state or the imperium. Yeah, you can call it the state in Renaissance, in Rene Descartes, because by the time he was writing, the notion of the state had uh, started appearing. Politics had definitely had made their appearance, and were uh, part of the mainstream vocabulary of people. So you can use the terms church and state in the context of Rene Descartes. You don't have to stick to the sacerdotium imperium thing. But if you like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with sticking to sacerdotium and imperium. That is the preferred option. But if you like, you can definitely talk about church and state. Church was there, state had begun to make its appearance. And so it it is not some kind of an anachronism that you would be creating if you talk about the church and the state as such. So feel free to talk about the church and the state. But if you're more comfortable with sacerdotium and imperium, so be it. You can also talk about the sacerdotium and the imperium. I leave it to you entirely. For your examination, however, when you write, please write church and state. Otherwise, people don't understand it. Anyway, so uh, so he talked about a unity between sacerdotium and imperium, or the church and the state. He wanted the imperium to conduct the temporal affairs of society, society in particular, and life in general. Okay. The intriguing thing about Rene Descartes, I don't know if it's stuck any of you, is that it's there in front of you, the intriguing thing. In order to forge a unity between the sacerdotium and imperium, or the church and the state, Rene Descartes creates another dualism. Okay. Sacerdotium imperium was a dualism that people were asking for even before Machiavelli. And with Machiavelli, you find that there is a separation of the imperium or the principalities from the church. And he did that by first introducing or reintroducing the political and politics, which had disappeared after the Hellenistic Greek period. It had disappeared after that, and it makes a comeback during his time. So he was trying to divide what were together, the sacerdotium and the imperium. Niccolo Machiavelli was trying to say that what should I say? He was basically trying to say that the sacerdotium is a separate sphere and that it has no place in the temporal life. And so he said, leave it to the imperium or the principalities of Rome in general. So what we find, therefore, is that there is this movement which was started by the partisans of the state, but they couldn't achieve the separation of the imperium from the sacerdotium, but Machiavelli achieved it. He managed to separate the imperium completely from the clutches of the sacerdotium, and he made the temporal activities come under the imperium, under the rule of a prince or a king. And the sacerdotium, he said, if it wants, he, like I told you, he simply doesn't even uh, acknowledge its existence. He says, if you want, you can have that in your spiritual domain, but don't bring it into the everyday domain of everyday life. That is what he was basically trying to say. And he more or less achieved what he wanted. There was the reintroduction of politics and the political, and it was separated from the ethical. And from Machiavelli onwards, I told you, ethics and morality are no longer the same. Okay, till Machiavelli, they could be used interchangeably, but when it comes to this thing, they needn't. I mean, they couldn't be used interchangeably. Morality became a completely different thing. We'll be looking at that when we talk about Kant. But you must understand that while Machiavelli wanted the separation of the sacerdotium and the imperium, and he didn't believe in ethics or morality, deliberately to keep the sacerdotium out of the imperium, he did this. But you find Rene Descartes trying exactly for the opposite, which is desiring imperium to consult the sacerdotium in matters where morality was involved. So he's trying to reintroduce morality, and he's basically trying to tell us that uh, whenever morality is involved, then the imperium or the state should consult the uh, church. In fact, he thought that his notion of what Christianity should be, the notion that would become a universal notion, and that more and more people would embrace this idea of his. So he realized that once the Renaissance and all these things have happened, and once the disjunction between the uh, church and the state, if you like, the temporal and the spiritual, that's another duality, which can be used instead of sacerdotium and imperium. If you like, you can use it. You can use this spiritual and temporal. Spiritual is that which is eternal, timeless. Temporal concerns are those which are they are those which are what should I say, pertaining to this life, right? That had been established. But he wanted, Rene Descartes wanted his version of Christianity to be embraced by the temporal realm or the imperial realm or the state. So what is his plan of action? He recognizes that he can no longer talk about Christianity the way it had been talked about in the past. He realized that the dualism that Christianity posited in the medieval period between, what should we say, between reason or rationality and faith. Uh, these are all things which basically cannot be replicated again. Okay, because people were no longer willing to accept that reason was a heretical category, and people were not going to uh, also accept putting the church in the middle of things, since its corruption had been exposed. So what does he want to do? He wants to project that religion, read that as Christianity, is rational. Okay? Religion is rational, and therefore its idea of morality is well considered and rational, and so he thought this religion should become the central theme of the, well, let me call it that, of the state. Now, if this is his project, if he wants to show, uh, that religion is rational, what has that got to do with mind-body dualism? That'll be the question. What has that got to do with the mind-body dualism? If you look at the mind-body dualism, it was done specifically for one reason, and that is to establish that reason is the realm of God and religion. That is what he was trying to do. So what is the mind-body dualism? Mind-body dualism is Rene Descartes believed that the mind could exist independently of the body, and the body could exist independently of the mind. Please excuse me, my please don't mind. I'll just stand and lecture. So for some time, you won't see anyone, but you'll hear me.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, because I'm unable to sit and I've been asked to stand up whenever I have this.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So when we talk about this mind-body dualism, so to speak, what we are doing in reality is saying that the mind can exist without the body can exist without the mind. Now, the function of knowing or function of perceiving or the function of cognition is something that is carried out by the brain. Okay, knowing, perceiving. When I'm saying perceiving, it's not sense perception. It is perceiving is just understanding. Doesn't always need to use the senses. So if you look at the idea of knowledge, of knowing, of perceiving, understanding, all these are qualities of the mind. The body also can exist without the mind. The body can also exist without the mind, but it cannot know of its existence, since knowing is the exclusive function of the mind. The body can exist, but it doesn't know that it is existing. So this is a very, very clever thing that Rene Descartes does. His radical skepticism. By the way, in some books you might read it as mind-brain dualism. That is not the case. There's no dualism between mind and brain. In those days, people rarely talked about the brain. It's only after, uh, you know, uh, medicine developed to a certain extent that people started talking about the brain as such. Otherwise, people didn't talk about the brain at all. they spoke mainly about the mind. Okay, so while the mind was capable of knowing about itself, was capable about understanding, uh, it was capable about understanding its existence or understanding about its existence, the body, which could exist independently of the mind, could never ever know that it is existing. So what the next step that Rene Descartes takes after this is that he introduces the concept of the supermind. Okay, now the supermind is something which is universal. Now, please understand that universal here is being used in a way which is very different from how we use universal. You say it's a universal thing when it is something that involves a large number of people. Okay, if it involves, say, an entire state or a couple of states, then you'll say it's a universal thing. Or you'll say it's a universal thing among Telugus. It's a universal thing among Tamilians. So what happens, therefore, is this particular category or supermind should not be understood as universal in this sense. It is universal as in the sense that it pervades the entire universe. The supermind pervades the entire universe. And what we derive, we mortals derive as a mind, is from the immortal supermind. First, he calls it supermind, but then he goes on to call it the supermind God. He calls this God, and he says God is what should I say? God pervades the universe. God is rational and the giver of rationality. So he's trying to turn the tables now on what Machiavelli did, and he's trying to Christianity, the official religion, his version of Christianity, of course, because what he says about Christianity is not there in any text or sacraments or anything about Christianity or anything related to Christianity. So when he says these things, it essentially means that he is saying that unless you believe in God and unless you accept that your mind and its rationality are derivations of the supermind and its rationality, then until you, yeah,
Sir, during his time, Bible came into existence.
yeah, of course, it was there.
He belongs to 16th century or 15th century. See,
I I have forgotten the dates, but I think it belongs to the 16th century only,
okay, sir.
but I'm not very sure. It's been a long time since I have, but I think it is 16th century. Anyway, you can check and correct me if I'm wrong, and I will appreciate that. Okay, Akshay. So, oh, I better get out. So please remember, he's now saying it's God, and God is the one who is controlling. God is the one who's controlling our minds. So he says, therefore, that we have to accept God. The mind-body dualism is created deliberately with one purpose, one single purpose, which is to make people accept that their rationality, that their intelligence, call it whatever you want, is an outcome of the intelligence and the rationality of the supermind. So you can have a body, but without the rational capability, it is senseless. Literally, it is senseless. So knowing is the power of the mind. And if you have to know, he's again introducing the old idea, go back to God, go back to God, which means read the Bible and those kind of things. So Descartes is channelizing these things in a particular fashion for the realization of this purpose. So thank you very much. See you today evening. I really hope to finish off Bentham. I will finish off Bentham. Thank you very much and see you in the evening.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and
Thank you, sir.
I'll be putting the link on the AVR group. I don't want to put the link on this group.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
so please take it from there. I mean,
Yes, sir.
enter from there. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, sir.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.